I first visited China with a group of photographers in the year 2000. We planned to carry sufficient film stock to avoid running short on the road. There were no digital cameras available at that time, able to provide images of equivalent quality to professional level film cameras. By 2017, I was wholly digitally equipped to photograph an event within a 600-year-old Chinese village, Puning, Guangdong province, at the compound of a beautifully kept ancient temple. Suddenly, a local media drone appeared in the sky high above. I calculated I could try to guide the vehicle into the temple in order to photograph it better. Another kind of photographic selfie. Calling to the machine in my rudimentary Mandarin, "Lai lai, lai ba," come on, waving my hand. It descended into the temple. Then, "Zai o bian" to the right, and "Wang xiao bian" to the left. It felt strange to be communicating with a drone as though an alien from the void, and in such a beautiful, venerated temple. And it responded exactly to my rogue commands, descending from a futuristic time zone into an ancestral temple and the immediate present, where everyone is a photographer and cameras surround us in intricate global surveillance of self and others. For myself, as a practicing artist and photographer, it has always been the oddness of the photographic image, a strange thing, a weird object, seen as though seen for the first time. And it is the most beautiful, direct way of seeing and describing the world without the prejudice of labels, conditioning what Susan Sontag, the author of On Photography, implies when she observes the most surreal aspect of photography as the photograph itself. The sheer magic of seeing a print develop in a clear bath of chemicals, or the beauty of a focused and detailed image upon a ground glass screen, never left the excited imagination of myself, our forebears and peers. Digital imaging technology proceeds with a photography brilliantly masquerading in electronic parody of its origins in light-sensitive material and chemistry, steadily fulfilling its own impressive potentials that may or may not supersede its analogue predecessor as mirrorless cameras, still images combined with HD video capacity, increased resolution, contrast range, tonal separation, and finely tuned auto settings for focus exposure with manual override. Yet, even now, for myself, and despite extensive speculation, adulation, and/or research, no one ever completely explained to my satisfaction what a photograph was comparable with what essentially this electro-digital counterpart is before us that we use industrially and so universally now. Analogue photography, in its machinistic compact between chemistry, mechanics and optics, became the 20th century modernist medium for modern times, affecting thinking, language and communication. For instance, in journalism, photography displaced text to context from its position as emphatic conveyance of news. Lithographic imagery had accounted for illustration of the text, whereas the photograph, within its limitations, described the actual event. Contemporary journalism continuously transacts the whole of news via still video and image and audio text, even today. Language, communication and ways of thinking changed rapidly to accord with modernist anticipations of formal simplicity, efficiency, flexibility, functionality, new materials, a lack of decoration, and so on. Consider our condition. Even now we're remnant modernists in that we will mock 19th century literature for being prolix, with no consideration of that literature form being the only reasonably dependent and detailed description of events we could expect until photography arrived. And in the wake of that naissance, the photograph shifted news communication from a dominant coded reportage to that of witness, given claims of superior authenticity of the still photograph, its minute, partial, yet brilliant trace of the real, fixing light and its absence. Before the arrival of a complete photographic apparatus, the camera, lens and light-sensitive chemically fixed plate between nature and illustration, time spread out endlessly in heavenly continuum. Western depiction, painting, was usually framed as an ersatz arched window and installed as church altar decoration. Before the camera obscura, there was no single or multiple point perspective, and prior to the lens, nothing was in or out of focus. The camera obscura image projected onto a transparent frame in a darkened box-like room determined the edge and portability of the photograph that, in time, literally remodelled the construction of theatre, inventing perspectival realism, and lives on in spectacular, ubiquitous, rectilinear screens, photographs, movies, television, print publication, amongst digital parodies of analogue visions, technology, knowledge, and imaginations. Within the past couple of decades, through the second industrial revolution, analogue still and motion picture technologies sparked up electro-digital parodies of their analogue antecedents. This provoked a stream of digital coda and building blocks, sensors, pixels, blending liminalities from a singular analogue system into a tangled potential of digitally parodied, animated as well as simple static imagery, into a lava flow of hybrid systems in the reformation of still and motion imaging. In this new order of the second global industrial revolution, extant processes, apparatus, materials become available options rather than, as it was for decades, all that was available at that time. In the menu bar at the foot of the camera screen of my already outdated iPhone, I can select between time-lapse, slow-mo, video, photo, portrait. In electro-digital parodical form, there appear greater immediately accessible options across the camera phone platform that contend a review of Stillness. Here is a preview for a deeply influential movie, Julian, since it was released in 1982, way ahead of schedule in terms of global observation, gravity-free, in 4 dimensions of space and time, including one particular tracking shot of an unnamed jet pilot.
Koyaanisqatsi is a kind of visual opera. Directed by Godfrey Reggio and scored by Philip Glass, it's closer to being a documentary than a work of fiction, but there is no dialogue in Koyaanisqatsi or clear story. The film progresses from images of nature and mankind's dominance, all to a wonderful score. It's weird, sure, but it's not inaccessible. It works as both a powerful comment on the state of humanity, but also as entertainment. You can watch closely at all the careful observations, or passively, and let the music wash over you. The moment I'm looking at here, however, is one of Koyaanisqatsi's moving portraits. Who is this pilot? What has he done? What does he think? We never know anything about him, but the track in and the music do suggest something. His face, the length of the shot, these are deliberate choices and they convey something. Essentially, what this sequence does is build up a character that we might want to know more about, and it never returns to him. And that's part of the film, a fleeting glimpse of civilization, but nothing more, because it is fleeting.
And a second look at a clip of the pilot. Do we continue to need a singular still photography? Worldwide, there are sufficient artists, designers and photographers interested, skilled and knowledgeable in analogue photography, especially in the potency of crafting a beautiful object. Apparently there remains some warehouse storage of analogue supplies, limited industrial production and second-hand or independently crafted equipment, supporting some manufacture and sale of analogue materials, processes and systems to justify a limited creative market. Additionally, there has been a rethinking and reinstatement of objecthood and thereby aesthetics in terms of artwork into the 21st century, predicating meaningful existential inquiry into the industrial and commercial photographic shift into digital technologies. In brief, it's an account of waves of thinking, modernist, postmodernist, and recycled strains of modernism through the 1960s into the 70s and 80s, from ontological to linguistic analysis of creative photography, and then sotto voce, back again. Whilst it's true that the digital system can recreate the appearance of any analogue image in digital formats, there remains something unique, even magical, about the original still photography. Leonardo da Vinci was certainly interested in the camera obscura when it came into common use during the Renaissance. He drew around 270 diagrams of the apparatus and used it as a model for understanding the workings of the human eye. The Mona Lisa portrait was not a widely appreciated Da Vinci artwork until it was stolen from the Louvre in 1911 and recovered in 1914. From that point, the mythology around the work grew, including romantic speculation around the smile. It seems as though Leonardo's painting was oddly prescient about the future, a live image captured on a screen. The smile appears temporal, fleeting, caught in stasis for a moment, then gone. So within the camera obscura used by Brunelleschi, the Italian architect in the 15th century, as it is today, 3 dimensions are compressed to 2, projected onto the screen at the rear of a darkened room or box in camera that, similar to graphic and or painterly pictorial space, prepared for stage composition in stasis as much as per much fashion, product and architectural photography. Compression of depth into width and height of a quadrilateral frame, registered perspective as a coda of the smallest objects appearing further away and the larger nearer. And note, prior to the incorporation of perspective via the camera obscura or mathematical formula, within medieval pictorial depiction, the scale of configuration registered social status only, not physical depth or distance. As photography developed into a discrete communication through its liminal shifts between the 19th, 20th and then 21st century, generating its own poetic schemata between the photographer, photographed and viewer, given that the three loci can function in all three posts at once or variations thereof. It also becomes clear that photography is a temporal or four-dimensional apparatus mapping closer to chaos than any other form of representation, compelling a photographer to live in confident harmony with time. Cartier-Bresson recognises this well in his nomination of The Decisive Moment. Francis Bacon, the English painter, understands it better than many photographers, so besotted he was with chaos in his studio, surrounded by scores of images that informed his painting, torn from colour photographic magazines of the time. Fine documentary, journalistic, street photography is a contemporary form of poetry. Each photograph, like a haiku poem, small, neat and beautifully crafted and potent with meaning. Stillness implies observation, contemplation and restraint. When a scene is photographed, it is transposed as a new object and in principle sculptural, whether haiku or fine woodwork for shaping, polishing, positioning words or compositional devices such as light, shade, colour, focus, etc., over and over again to deliver meaning with maximum impact. And that is a stillness that will not be removed.